precious heirloom sold for milk money leads a woman to an unexpected reunion, where the jeweler holding the necklace turns out to be the father she never knew. Naomi woke up before the sun rose. Her small apartment was cold, and the air felt heavy with silence. She looked at her son Elijah, who was still sleeping peacefully on their worn-out mattress. His tiny arms were wrapped around a stuffed bear, missing one eye. Naomi sat up slowly, feeling the ache in her back. She had worked 2 long shifts the day before, one cleaning offices, the other at a fast food counter. Her body was tired, but her mind was already racing. She walked into the kitchen, hoping to find anything to make for breakfast. The fridge made a humming sound as she opened it. Inside were only 2 eggs, a half bottle of ketchup, and an old slice of bread that had started to turn hard. Naomi checked the small shelf where she kept Elijah's milk, but the bottle was empty. She opened the cupboard, a few tea bags, some salt, and an almost empty bag of flour, nothing else. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the tears. She had no money left until payday, and even then, it wouldn't be enough to cover rent and food. Her stomach growled, but she was used to that. What hurt more was knowing her son would wake up hungry. Elijah was only 3, with bright eyes and a laugh that could melt any heart. But he didn't understand why sometimes they had to skip meals, or why Mama cried in the bathroom late at night. Naomi had grown up in hardship too. Her mother Ruth had raised her alone, working double shifts as a nurse's aide. Ruth was strong, proud, and always doing her best. But she had died from cancer when Naomi was just 16. After that, Naomi had bounced between relatives and part-time jobs, struggling to stay in school. She never finished high school. Life moved too fast, and survival became more important than dreams. Now at 24, Naomi found herself in the same fight her mother had once fought. Alone, working too hard for too little, and trying to protect a child from the weight of poverty. She felt like she was drowning, and the surface kept getting farther away. Elijah stirred in the bedroom and then called out, "Mama?" Naomi wiped her face and forced a smile. "I'm right here, baby," she said, walking over and scooping him up. "I want cereal," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "I know, sweetie. We'll have something yummy soon, okay?" He nodded, still half asleep, and leaned into her. Naomi carried him to the couch, wrapping them both in a blanket. She turned on the TV, hoping a cartoon would distract him. As the screen lit up, Naomi's eyes drifted to the small wooden box on the shelf above the fireplace. It was dusty, barely touched in years. Inside was the only thing she had from her mother, a necklace. She stood up and opened the box. At the necklace lay on a soft piece of velvet cloth. It was gold, delicate, and old-fashioned. A tiny emerald sparkled in the middle of a charm shaped like a teardrop. Her mother had always worn it on special occasions. Naomi remembered how her mother once told her it had belonged to her own mother, and maybe even before that. Naomi had never thought of selling it. It wasn't just a necklace, it was the last piece of her mother she had. But as she looked at her hungry son in the empty fridge, the idea came uninvited. Maybe it was time to let go of the past to survive the present. She sat at the table, holding the necklace in her hand. It felt warm, almost alive, as if it carried all the love and strength her mother had left behind. Tears fell quietly down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered. "I don't have a choice." Later that morning, after dressing Elijah in his warmest clothes, she tucked the necklace carefully into a cloth and placed it in her coat pocket. She took Elijah by the hand, and they began walking through the snow-covered streets. Naomi didn't own a car, and buses were often too expensive. So walking had become their usual way to get anywhere. The city looked gray and tired, much like Naomi herself. People rushed past without making eye contact. A man played sad music on a saxophone near the corner store. Naomi passed a pawn shop but kept walking. She didn't trust pawn shops. They often cheated people out of what little they had. She needed someone honest, someone who would see the necklace's real value. She remembered hearing about a small jewelry store across town, owned by an old man who had been around for decades. He was said to be fair, though strict. Naomi had never been there, but it was her best hope. It took almost an hour to reach the shop. Elijah was cold and tired, but he didn't complain. Naomi promised him they would get milk and a cookie once they were done. The shop stood between a barber's and a bakery, with an old green sign above the door that read Jeremiah's Fine Jewelry. The window display was simple, some silver chains, a few rings, and a dusty sign that read We buy estate jewelry. Naomi took a deep breath and pushed the door open. A small bell rang as they entered. The warmth inside felt like a blessing after the freezing walk. Behind the counter stood a tall, older black man with silver hair and kind but serious eyes. He looked up from a book he was reading and gave Naomi a small nod. "Good morning," he said. "Hi. I have something I'd like to sell," Naomi said, trying to keep her voice steady. She pulled the cloth from her pocket and placed the necklace on the counter. The man's eyes widened slightly, though he tried to hide it, picked up the necklace carefully, examining it with a jeweler's loupe. He didn't speak for a long time, and Naomi's heart pounded in her chest. "Where did you get this?" he finally asked. "It belonged to my mother," Naomi replied. "She passed away when I was a teenager. It's all I have left of her." "Ah!" The man nodded slowly. His hands trembled slightly as he held the necklace. Naomi didn't notice. She was too focused on trying not to cry. I need enough to buy some food. Milk, mostly, for my son." The man looked down at Elijah, who was quietly leaning against Naomi's leg, watching everything with wide eyes. "I see," the jeweler said softly. "This piece is special. It's old. It's very old. May I hold on to it for a day or two to evaluate it properly?" "I'll give you a receipt, of course." Naomi hesitated. Every part of her wanted to say no, but she could see that he wasn't trying to cheat her. His voice had a calmness she hadn't heard in a long time. "Okay?" she said quietly. The man took out a small pad, wrote up a receipt, and handed it to her. "Come back in 2 days," he said. "I'll tell you what I find." Naomi nodded. She gathered Elijah in her arms and turned to leave. The man watched them as the door closed behind them, the bell ringing once again. Outside, the snow was falling gently now. Naomi still didn't know how much the necklace was worth. She didn't know if she would get enough for milk or if she would regret giving it up forever. But she knew one thing. Today she had done something brave. Why, she had taken a piece of her past and tried to turn it into hope for the future. Back in the jewelry store, the man stared at the necklace for a long time. He touched the tiny emerald, then opened a drawer and pulled out an old photo. His eyes filled with tears. In the photo was a young woman, Naomi's mother, wearing the same necklace. The man, Jeremiah, held the photo and whispered, "Is it really her?" He had spent years wondering what happened to the woman he once loved. And now a young woman had walked into his shop, carrying a piece of the past he thought he'd lost forever. He had no idea her name was Naomi. He didn't know yet that she was his daughter. But soon he would, and everything would change. Naomi couldn't stop thinking about the man in the jewelry shop. There was something about him, something calm, quiet, yet strong. He hadn't smiled much, but his eyes had looked at her with care, not pity. That made her trust him more than she expected. Still, she felt nervous as she walked home through the cold with Elijah's tiny hand in hers, and the receipt for the necklace folded tightly in her coat pocket. She wasn't sure if she had done the right thing, but it was done. Now she had to wait 2 days and hope the necklace would bring enough to help them get through the month. That night, Naomi made Elijah a simple dinner of toast and warm water with a little sugar. He didn't complain. He just sat quietly, chewing slowly, watching her with those big brown eyes. He always seemed to know when things were hard, even if he didn't understand everything. After putting him to bed, Naomi sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching snowflakes drift under the streetlight. The city was quiet, and she let her thoughts wander to her mother. She remembered how her mother had worn that necklace during the holidays, or whenever there was a special event. Naomi never knew much about it, only that it had been passed down through generations. Her mother had once said, "This necklace holds our family's strength." At the time, Naomi didn't understand what that meant. Now, as an adult and a mother herself, she began to feel the weight of those words. Back at the jewelry store, Jeremiah couldn't sleep. Sat in his small office behind the shop, holding the necklace in one hand and a photograph in the other. The photograph was old and faded. In it, a young woman smiled at the camera, her eyes filled with joy. She was wearing the very necklace Naomi had brought in. Her name was Ruth. Jeremiah remembered the day the picture was taken. It was summer. They were both young and full of dreams. He and Ruth had met at a community college, where he was learning to become a jeweler, and she was studying nursing. They had fallen in love quickly. Ruth was strong-willed, smart, and full of fire. Jeremiah had wanted to marry her, but life had other plans. Her family had moved suddenly, and she had disappeared from his life without a word. He had searched for her for a while, but with no address, no phone number, no way to reach her. The trail had gone cold. Years passed. He moved on, or at least tried to, but he never stopped thinking about her. Now, decades later, a young woman had walked into his shop carrying Ruth's necklace. In her eyes there was something in them, something familiar, something that made his heart ache. He had asked her name, but she hadn't given it. All she said was that the necklace belonged to her mother, who had died years ago. Jeremiah gently placed the necklace under a magnifying glass. He examined it carefully. The gold was slightly worn but still beautiful. The emerald in the center was real, small, but pure in color. He turned it over and noticed something many would miss, a small engraving hidden along the edge of the pendant. It was tiny, but he knew what it said. He had engraved it himself many years ago. It read, "To R, with all my heart, J." His hands trembled. There was no doubt anymore. This necklace was the same one he had given Ruth as a gift. Meant the girl who brought it in. She was most likely his daughter. He sat back in his chair, overwhelmed. 1,000 thoughts filled his mind. Had Ruth known she was pregnant when she left? Why didn't she tell him? Why had he missed all those years of his daughter's life? And now she had a child of her own, his grandson. He wanted to ask her questions, but he didn't want to scare her away. She was clearly struggling, and he didn't want to add more pressure. He needed to be careful, to be gentle. He wanted to help, but how? The next day, Jeremiah went to the local records office. It was a small building, filled with shelves of old papers and computers that worked too slowly. He gave the clerk what little information he had: the necklace, the name Ruth, and the time period when they might have had a child. The woman at the counter gave him a tired look, but eventually agreed to help him search. After hours of digging, they found a birth certificate. A girl named Naomi Ruth Williams, born the year after Ruth had left town. No father listed. The mother's name matched exactly. Jeremiah stared at the paper. Naomi. That was her name. He whispered it to himself. Several times, Naomi, his daughter. He left the records office feeling like he was walking through a dream. His feet felt heavy, but his heart was racing. For years he had wondered if he had a family somewhere. Now he knew. What? But what would he do with that truth? Meanwhile, Naomi was trying to stay busy. She cleaned houses during the day and worked at the fast food restaurant in the evenings. Every hour felt longer now that she didn't have the necklace. She kept reaching into her pocket, expecting to feel its familiar shape. It was strange how something could feel like a part of you even when you barely looked at it for years. Thought about the man at the jewelry store? There was something in his eyes when he saw the necklace. Not just interest, but recognition. Had he seen one like it before? Or had he known her mother somehow? She shook the thought away. It didn't make sense. 2 days later, Naomi stood in front of the jewelry shop again. Her boots were wet from melted snow, and Elijah clung to her side, asking if they were getting milk now. She nodded, squeezing his hand. They stepped inside. The bell rang, and the warm air welcomed them. Jeremiah looked up from behind the counter. When he saw them, a quiet softness passed across his face. "Good morning," he said. Naomi gave a small smile. "Hi, I came back for the necklace, or whatever you decided." Jeremiah nodded. He walked slowly into the back room and returned, with the necklace resting carefully in a velvet box. "I examined it closely," he began. "It's a very rare piece. Gold is old, and the emerald is valuable. But more than that, this necklace is part of something important.
Family.
History. Naomi tilted her head, surprised by his words. What do you mean? Jeremiah paused, trying to choose his words. He didn't want to scare her. He didn't want to tell her everything too fast. But he also didn't want to lie. I've seen this necklace before, he said slowly. A long time ago, I gave it to someone very special. Naomi's eyes widened. You gave it to my mother? I think so, he said softly. Her name was Ruth, wasn't it? Naomi nodded slowly, confusion spreading across her face. Jeremiah looked down for a moment, then back at her. I knew her a long time ago. We're close, and I believe I'm your father, Naomi. The words hung in the air like thunder. Naomi stared at him, frozen. What? Jeremiah swallowed hard. I didn't know she was pregnant. She left without telling me. I never stopped wondering what happened to her. When you came in with the necklace, I recognized it immediately. I checked the records. Saw your name? Naomi Ruth Williams? Your mother named you after herself? Naomi took a step back. Her hands shook. Elijah held on to her tighter. This can't be true, she whispered. I know it's a lot, Jeremiah said, gently. I'm not asking you to believe it right away. I just wanted to tell you the truth. I missed everything. Your childhood, your teenage years, and now here you are, strong young woman, doing everything you can for your son. I'm proud of you already, even if I just met you. Naomi didn't know what to say. She felt like the floor had disappeared. Under her feet, part of her wanted to run, another part wanted to cry, and a small voice inside her whispered, could this really be true? Jeremiah walked around the counter and crouched beside Elijah. Hi there, he said kindly. I'm Jeremiah. Elijah looked at him shyly, then smiled. I like your shop. Jeremiah laughed softly.
Thank you. Maybe one day I can show you how to fix watches.
Naomi watched them, her heart full of emotions she didn't know how to name. Confusion, fear, hope. I don't know what to think, she said quietly. I wasn't looking for a father. I understand, Jeremiah replied. I was hoping maybe you'd let me be part of your life. Slowly, in whatever way you're comfortable. Naomi looked at the necklace, then at Elijah, then at the man who might be her father, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely alone. Naomi couldn't sleep that night. She sat near the window, her eyes watching the dark street, the shadows of trees swaying in the wind. Her heart was full of questions, memories, and confusion. The man from the jewelry shop, Jeremiah, had just told her something that changed everything. He believed he was her father. It didn't feel real. She had spent her whole life believing she didn't have a father. Her mother, Ruth, had never spoken of him. She never showed pictures, never told stories, never even mentioned a name. Naomi had asked when she was younger, but her mother would always change the topic or give a quiet reply. It's just us, baby girl. Naomi had accepted that. She had told herself that maybe he had left them. Maybe he had been someone who didn't want them. Or maybe he had died. But now, suddenly, a stranger had looked at her with tears in his eyes and told her he had been searching, that he had loved her mother, that he had never known about her. She didn't know what to believe. People lied. People changed their stories. But there was something in Jeremiah's face, something honest, something gentle that made her pause. When he had spoken to Elijah, her son, with such kindness and patience, she felt something soft open in her heart, even if she didn't want it to. She thought about the way he had touched the necklace, as if it was a part of him too. The way he said he had engraved it for Ruth so many years ago. Naomi had never noticed the engraving, but maybe that was true. Maybe it really had come from him. Maybe her mother had left without saying goodbye. But why? Something so big? Why would she never tell her daughter that her father was still alive? Naomi turned her head to look at Elijah, who was fast asleep in his bed. He looked peaceful, his small body curled up under a faded cartoon blanket. She walked over, brushed a soft curl off his forehead, and kissed him gently. Her son was the most important thing in her world. If Jeremiah was truly her father, Elijah's grandfather, could this mean a better future for both of them? The next morning, Naomi didn't go to work. She called in sick and dropped Elijah off at a neighbor's apartment. Mrs. Jenkins, An older woman who lived down the hall was always happy to watch him for a few hours. Naomi needed to think. She needed answers. She found herself standing in front of Jeremiah's shop once again, this time alone. Her heart beat fast as she pushed open the door. The familiar bell rang, and Jeremiah looked up from the counter. His face lit up with quiet surprise. "Naomi," he said softly. She nodded. "Can we talk?" "Course. Come in." He led her to the small back room of the shop, where a worn couch sat near a coffee table, next to a shelf full of old books and watch parts. The air smelled like polished wood and time. They sat down, and for a few moments, neither spoke. Then, Naomi took a deep breath. "Why didn't you ever find us?"
Hi, Mother.
"She never told me anything about you." Jeremiah leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "I didn't know she was pregnant," he said quietly. "Ruth and I were close. We're planning a future together. Then one day she was gone. Her family moved. No warning. No note. I searched for her, Naomi. I even drove to her hometown, but no one knew anything. I thought she had left me." Naomi looked down. Her mother had never mentioned any of that. "I wish I could have been there," Jeremiah continued, his voice shaking slightly. "To see you grow up, to help your mother, I would have. I swear I would have. Why should I believe you?" Naomi asked, her voice quiet but strong. "It's been 24 years. My whole life. You weren't there when we were hungry, when I had to drop out of school, when I had Elijah. You didn't even know I existed." Jeremiah nodded, accepting every word. "I understand. I don't expect you to trust me right away. I just want to be here now, if you'll let me." Naomi sat back, folding her arms. "I'm not sure. This is a lot." He gave her a soft smile. "Take your time. I'll be here." Over the next few days, Naomi tried to return to normal life, but nothing felt normal. She kept remembering pieces of the past quiet moments with her mother, late-night stories, the way Ruth sometimes stared at the necklace for a long time without speaking. Was she thinking of Jeremiah during those moments? Was she hiding pain or guilt? She asked herself again and again, why did her mother keep this secret? She decided to visit the old photo box in her closet. It was a small box, dusty and mostly forgotten. Inside were old pictures, baby photos, birthday parties, school days, and a few of her mother, smiling but tired, near the bottom of the box. Naomi found something she hadn't noticed before, a folded letter. It was yellow with age. The handwriting was her mother's. Her hands shook as she opened it. The letter wasn't addressed to anyone. It read more like a diary entry. Ruth had written about heartbreak, about having to leave the city quickly to care for her sick father. She had written about being pregnant and scared. She hadn't told Jeremiah because she didn't want to hold him back. He had a dream, the letter read. He was going to open a shop. "I didn't want him to give that up for me and a child he didn't plan." Tears fell silently from Naomi's eyes. Her mother hadn't wanted to hurt Jeremiah. She had thought she was doing the right thing. She had loved him, but she had made a choice alone. Naomi folded the letter and held it close to her chest. Maybe it was true. Maybe Jeremiah had never stopped caring the next day. Naomi returned to the jewelry shop again, this time with Elijah. The boy ran to the counter and grinned at Jeremiah. "Are we going to fix watches today?" he asked. Jeremiah laughed. "We sure are. Ready to learn?" Naomi smiled too, this time without fear. She began visiting the shop often, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to sit quietly. Jeremiah never pushed. He never demanded answers or forced feelings. He was just there offering warmth, kindness, and a soft place to land. He taught Elijah how to count clock gears, how to tell time on old watches, and even let him sit on a tall stool and press buttons on the cash register. Elijah called him Mr. J at first. Then one day, without thinking, he called him Grandpa. Jeremiah's eyes filled with tears. But he didn't say a word. He just smiled and hugged the boy tightly. As the weeks passed, Naomi saw something changing in herself too. She started walking a little taller. She laughed more. She found the strength to apply for a GED program, something she had once thought was impossible. With Jeremiah's quiet support, she began to believe she could dream again. One evening, Naomi and Jeremiah sat on a bench outside the shop, sipping warm tea from paper cups. The street was calm, the sky turning orange as the sun set. Naomi looked over at him. "I believe you now," she said. Jeremiah turned to her, his eyes soft. "I know," he replied. "I don't know if I'm ready to call you Dad, but I want to try." He nodded, holding back emotion. "That's more than enough." They sat in silence for a while, just listening to the city breathe around them. The past was heavy, but it didn't feel so painful anymore. It was starting to feel like something that had shaped them, but not something that had to define them. Inside the shop, Elijah was laughing, playing with a toy watch Jeremiah had given him. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the evening wash over her. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had a home, not just a place to sleep, but a place in someone's heart, a connection she had never known she was missing. A family. Not perfect, not planned. It had all started with a necklace. After that evening on the bench, Naomi felt a small change growing inside her, a new kind of hope that she hadn't felt in years. She started to imagine a different life, a life where she didn't have to carry the weight of loneliness and struggle alone. The idea of having Jeremiah, a man who might be her father, near her, supporting her and Elijah, was both strange and comforting. Naomi continued visiting the jewelry shop regularly. It became a place of peace in her hectic world. The shop was small but warm, filled with tiny ticking clocks, sparkling gems, and the soft sound of Jeremiah's tools fixing broken watches. Elijah loved it there too, running around with his new grandpa, watching every move Jeremiah made. Jeremiah was careful not to rush Naomi. He understood that years of distance couldn't be erased overnight. Some days she came ready to talk, and other days she barely said a word. But he was patient, always ready to listen, to share stories from his own life, or to teach Elijah something new about watches and jewels. One afternoon, as Naomi and Jeremiah sat at the counter sipping coffee, she asked him about his life, how he had become a jeweler, what his dreams were, and what had kept him going all these years. Jeremiah smiled, a little shy but proud. "I learned from my grandfather," he said. "He was a watchmaker. Taught me to appreciate the little things, the tiny gears that make a watch tick, the way a jewel catches the light. I guess that's why I loved your mother so much. She was like that, appreciating the small, beautiful things in life, even when things were hard." Naomi nodded. She could see that now. Her mother's strength, her quiet hope, had come from somewhere. Maybe from Jeremiah. Maybe from the love they had once shared. As days turned into weeks, Naomi found herself opening up more. She told Jeremiah about the tough times she had faced being a single mother, working long hours, feeling exhausted and scared. Jeremiah listened without judgment, offering only kindness and support. One cold evening, Naomi brought Elijah to the shop after her shift. She was tired, her shoulders heavy, but there was a small smile on her face. Elijah ran to Jeremiah, shouting, "Grandpa, Grandpa, look what I made at school." He held up a crooked paper watch he had made in art class. Jeremiah laughed and gave Elijah a warm hug. "That's wonderful, Elijah. Maybe one day you'll make real watches like me." Naomi felt tears prick her eyes. For so long, she had felt like she was barely holding on. But here, in this small shop, with this man who might be her father, and her son who was growing and laughing, she felt something new. She felt a kind of family. The winter months passed. Jeremiah helped Naomi apply for better jobs and even offered to help her with some classes to finish her education. He told her that it was never too late to chase dreams. Naomi began to believe him. One day, while cleaning out an old drawer in the shop, Jeremiah found a faded photo album. He showed it to Naomi. It was filled with pictures of Ruth young, smiling, full of life, and pictures of Jeremiah and Ruth together. There were pictures of a small house, of summer picnics, and of the necklace itself. Shining bright on Ruth's neck, Naomi traced her fingers over the photos, feeling connected to a past she had never known. "She looked so happy," Naomi whispered. Jeremiah nodded. "She was. And she loved you. I know she did." Naomi smiled softly. "I wish she could see this." Jeremiah looked at her with sadness and hope mixed together. "Maybe she does, in a way. she brought us together again." Slowly, the wounds from years of separation began to heal. Naomi learned to trust Jeremiah. She realized that family was not about perfect moments or flawless memories, but about showing up, caring, and trying. One evening, after a long day, Jeremiah invited Naomi and Elijah to his small apartment above the shop for dinner. It wasn't much, but it was warm, filled with the smell of stew and fresh bread. Elijah immediately took to the place, exploring every corner with wide eyes as they ate. Together, Naomi felt a deep sense of belonging. Jeremiah shared stories about his own childhood, about mistakes he had made, and the lessons he had learned. Naomi shared stories about Ruth, about her dreams for Elijah, and about the future she wanted to build. They laughed, they cried, and for the first time in a long time, Naomi felt like she was part of something bigger. As the months went by, Jeremiah and Naomi's relationship grew stronger. They talked more openly about the past and the pain it had caused. Jeremiah apologized for not being there, and Naomi forgave him. Understanding that life had been complicated, Jeremiah also met Elijah's mother, the woman who had helped Naomi during a difficult time. She was kind and welcoming, and Jeremiah was grateful to see how much love surrounded his grandson. Naomi started to feel more confident. She enrolled in classes, worked harder, and even started dreaming again. She imagined a future where Elijah could grow up with his grandfather's love, where they could celebrate holidays together, and where the past was a foundation, not a burden. One spring afternoon, Naomi and Jeremiah took Elijah to a park. They watched him run, laugh, and play with other children. Jeremiah pointed to the sun shining through the trees. "See, Naomi? Even broken things can shine again, just like this necklace." Naomi smiled, her heart full. The necklace had been lost and sold for milk money, but it had come back to them, a symbol of love, hope, and new beginnings. She knew their story wasn't finished. There would be challenges ahead. But now, she didn't have to face them alone. The story of Naomi, Jeremiah, and Elijah was now reaching a new chapter, one filled with hope, healing, and the promise of a future they all could build together. But the path wasn't always easy, and even as they grew closer, challenges tested their new family bond. Naomi found herself thinking back to the day she had sold the heirloom necklace for milk money. That moment had felt like a loss, a sacrifice she had to make just to keep her son fed. But little did she know then, that necklace was the key to unlocking a story she had never imagined. Now, as she sat in Jeremiah's shop, watching Elijah play with a tiny gear from a watch, she felt grateful for how far they had come. Her relationship with Jeremiah wasn't perfect. There were moments of awkwardness and doubt. Sometimes Naomi caught herself wondering if she could really trust him. Was he truly her father, or just a man longing for a connection? Was she ready to open her heart after years of disappointment? But Jeremiah never pressured her. He was gentle, patient, and honest. He listened to her fears and shared his own. Slowly, they built a foundation of trust, brick by brick. One of the biggest changes came in Naomi's confidence. Jeremiah encouraged her to go back to school, to finish what she had started. It wasn't easy. Balancing work, motherhood, and studies was exhausting, but Jeremiah helped whenever he could. He babysat Elijah, cooked meals, and cheered her on. Naomi discovered she had more strength than she had ever known. She began dreaming again, dreaming not just for herself, but for Elijah. She wanted him to grow up with opportunities she never had. Jeremiah was proud of her, told her often, "You're stronger than you think." Elijah was blossoming too. Two loving adults around. He learned more every day. He started asking questions about his family, about his grandfather, Jeremiah, and about the necklace that had started it all. Jeremiah showed him how to care for watches and told him stories about his own childhood. One afternoon, Elijah asked, "Grandpa, why did you want to find me and Mommy so much?" Jeremiah smiled, his eyes soft. "Because family is the most important thing. No matter what happens, we take care of each other." Naomi overheard this and felt tears fill her eyes. She was grateful that Elijah had this chance to know his grandfather. to feel loved and supported. Life wasn't without its struggles. There were still bills to pay, worries about work, and the lingering pain of years lost. Naomi's mother, Ruth, had passed away before they could ever reunite. Naomi had never met her father before. The past could not be changed, but they could create something new. The necklace, once forgotten and sold, was restored and polished by Jeremiah. It now held even greater meaning, a symbol of their past, present, and future. Naomi kept the necklace in a small box by her bedside. Every time she looked at it, she remembered the journey, the sacrifices, the heartbreak, and the healing. One day, Jeremiah surprised Naomi with a small gift. It was a locket, engraved with the initials N and E for Naomi and Elijah. Inside was a tiny photo of Ruth, smiling softly. "I want you to have this," Jeremiah said, "to remember where we come from and to hold on to hope."
Ow.
Naomi took the locket with trembling hands. She felt a connection to her mother she hadn't had before. She felt the love that had been there all along, waiting to be found. As the years passed, Naomi, Jeremiah, and Elijah continued to build their family. They celebrated birthdays, holidays, and small victories. They shared dinners, laughter, and tears. Naomi finished her education and found a better job. Oh my God. Jewelry shop, and even began teaching Elijah the craft. Elijah grew up knowing the story of the necklace, knowing that even the smallest things can have the greatest meaning. Through it all, Naomi learned that family is not just about blood or perfect timing. It is about showing up, forgiving, and loving despite mistakes and distance. The necklace had been lost, but love had been found, and that was the most precious heirloom of all.